Welcome back to the It's Just Sport podcast, A League of Her Own. I'm Joanna Reardon.
I'm Niamh Talon, and we are very excited to talk to Sarah today. Sarah, tell us a little bit about what you do, and let's educate the audience on your really exciting project.
The project is the Sports Bra Project. So at its simplest form, we provide sports bras to girls and women in areas where that can be a barrier to participation. But I think, as we know, sport is sort of a reflection of society. So there's a lot bigger conversation behind just why that's there and why there's still a need and why we need to normalize that conversation.
You obviously are involved in kind of coaching. I was reading that you've 15 plus years coaching NCAA and NJCAA, even soccer. You're obviously a keen sports fan. Have you noticed that sports bras were a bit of a luxury, or was it just kind of for you? Was it a bit of a given? Because as women, I suppose we just assume everyone has a sports bra.
I think I'm part of that first generation that kind of grew up with them. I'm a Title IX baby. So when I was in high school and college, sports bras were just coming in. And, you had them, they were around, but we didn't really talk too much about them. And then obviously sort of staying in it, playing and coaching, sports bras became much more commonplace and much easier to get a hold of. But then soccer's been one of those amazing things that's allowed me to travel and work with so many different groups and so many different places, and realizing that, there's still barriers for girls to participate. And we're not addressing all of them, but the sports bra is a simple one that can be addressed. It's just a piece of equipment, but it's also a indication of that it hasn't been normalized yet. And girls are still sort of the outlier a little bit, and the boys' needs and experiences are the norm. So even having that conversation of, we lose girls at between 11 and 15 when they hit puberty. And why is that? Is it because the sports bra? It's not the only reason, but there's a piece of it that it's just not a normal part of conversation, and they still see themselves as other and not necessarily fully belonging. So it was one of those things that, having seen that in so many different countries and so many different areas, it looks different in Manhattan than it does in, say, Namibia, but the same barriers and the same idea of cultural expectations exist.
Yeah. Tell us about the background of the Sports Bra Project and how exactly it came about. So tell us a bit about Africa.
So I went with another organization. We'd sent over a shipping container of school materials as well as soccer equipment, and then there was a group of 4 of us that were just going to go and make sure, kind of deliver it and be there on site and see kind of where things were, and work with a few different groups. And I'd already been to Brazil and already been in different places in the US, and had seen that sports bras were one of those manufactured goods can be expensive. Services in some countries are inexpensive, but manufactured goods can be prohibitively expensive. And I was like, you know what, let me just bring sports bras. I think one of the groups that we work with, probably will have a need. So I think I put 30 or 40 in my suitcase with some other stuff. And the woman we were working with is this wonderful woman, Jackie Gertza. She works for the Namibian Football Association, and she runs their women's desk, which was actually 2 desks and an old converted shower when we were there. I don't know what it is now, but and she also runs a Gals for Goals program, which is in rural areas. And so I asked her when we were there for the day, I was like, do you have the need for sports bras? And I thought she would give them to, the very rural communities that we'd seen where there are no stores, there is no Walmart, and Amazon does not deliver. But she asked if she could give them to her national team players. And that kind of floored me, because we were in the capital city. We were at their national training center, and of all the places in Namibia, this would be where sports bras would be most accessible, and they weren't, or they were cost prohibitive. So that kind of opened my eyes, and it kind of sort of was like, all right, maybe we could do this a little bit more. And some female coaches and I were like, if you travel, we'll give you sports bras. If you travel, I will, and we'll just kind of make this a small little side project and something that, we can, do some good and have some fun with it and sort of work together on it. And then we realized really quickly that it just, it resonated across so many different sports and across so many different levels that we decided to make it bigger and make it its own nonprofit and see what we can do to grow it.
How, in my head, when I hear Sports Bra Project, in my head, I imagine I've bought a sports bra, it doesn't fit me. I ring you, Sarah, and I say, Sarah, I've got this lovely Nike bra. Can you deliver to someone? Or is it a bit more technical now than that? Have I really dumbed it down?
Well, it is a simple project. So at one level, yes, if you have extra sports bras, we will take sports bras. They do need to be new. That is one of our stipulations, is they have it for lots of legal reasons, as well as for if you're only getting one bra, we want to make sure it's a quality new bra. The way we get most of our bras is teams do sports bra drives. So you can have a U13 girls team where each player contributes one bra, and they send those bras to us. We combine them with a bunch of other teams' bras, and then we give them to organizations that have a need. And the idea was that that's kind of been the fun part for us, is seeing what teams do, because you can have a college team do it. We've had entire college athletic departments do it. So their men's teams are collecting bras at games too, which is great. And the idea is that if you're running a sports bra project, it should really reflect kind of your community and what you're interested in. So like the U13 girls, where they each bring one bra, that's great. Or we had student athletic, at the SAC committees at colleges, which are made up of sort of the leadership of all of the sports teams and the athletes on the teams. They've run ones that have been other colleges. So if you bring a sports bra to a game in, say, October, you got a free admission to whichever game you were going to. So they all look very, very different. Some of them collect 20 bras, some of them collect 200. We had a tournament last weekend where they hosted a sports bra drive, and they raised funds, but they also collected sports bras from teams participating. And then they come to us, and we get them out to organizations that are nonprofits. Yeah.
Cool.
That's amazing. Tell us a little bit about, like, obviously it has completely changed from what you started off doing, and obviously you're doing it in loads of different places. So talk to us about the scaling up, because it's obviously something that people are, really getting involved, like at community level, but it's just going so far. So how far has it gone around the world?
Our first shipments were about 30 to 50 bras, and 100 bras was a big shipment. We just sent 1,000 bras to an organization in DC that works with more than 400 nonprofits. They provide them used sports equipment. So we're giving them sports bras, which supports their already existing programming. And so the 1,000 bra shipment was our first, and we're kind of like, oh my goodness, we can't believe
That's amazing.
We did this. And then another group that we're just in the process of having bras sent to is called Beat the Streets. It's a wrestling organization. So about 25% of their athletes are female, and they're in 7 or 8 cities in the US, like New York, Chicago, LA, and a handful of others that I'm forgetting right now. But we're providing sports bras for their programs. They're using education in sports, the sport of wrestling, to kind of keep kids engaged in school and provide activities out after school programming to sort of keep them in a safe environment in the sort of dangerous hours right after school before families get home.
Yeah, like, as in, did you think this was like a problem, say, only in, countries where women's football and other sports even are so disregarded? Or like, were you surprised as well in the US that you needed sports bras for a lot of girls as well?
I think we recognized it in the US, and that's one thing we've really wanted to kind of hit home, is that this isn't just an other world problem. This isn't just, a developing country or someplace that we think we can come in and help. This is something that's really universal. And the 3 areas that we usually find where there's barriers are cultural, logistic, and financial. And they, as I said, they look different in Manhattan than they do in a rural town in rural Namibia, or than they do in Mexico. But the barriers are pretty much the same. There is still the cultural stigma. There is still the financial component that if girls really aren't encouraged to play in the first place, if finances are tight, buying a $20 to $80 sports bra is not going to be feasible. And then logistical, we don't see as many logistical issues in the US because Amazon, as I said, does deliver just about everywhere, but a lot of places it's still hard to get to. So we really want to make sure that that conversation isn't just about the US and other countries. It's about, this is a worldwide thing, and the sports bra is one of those universal needs. Whatever sport you're playing, whatever level it is, whether you're a recreational athlete, whether you're an elite athlete, it's something that cuts across all of that. And it's one of those, and I think that's what's been really fun for me, is to get to work with so many different organizations from different levels and different sports. And for me, having the wrestling group that we're working with is wonderful. I would have loved to have been able to wrestle when I was younger. It was certainly nothing that was allowed in the 80s girls. That was not something we did. And I love being able to see all these girls have these opportunities now. So it's a conversation that we want to it's universal, and we wanted to make sure that we do that. So this year, partially because of COVID, partially because of a conscious decision, most of the bras about 75% of the bras that we'll distribute this year will go to organizations working in the U.S. And some of them are in rural communities, and some of them are in inner city communities or first generation immigrant communities. And then about 25% will go to other countries and other places.
That's what I was kind of curious about, because soccer in America, like it's not like here where, I'm not saying like it's free to play, but like signing up to academy isn't as expensive as will be in the US. Like, is there like a specific kind of generation or group of people, that you see kind of sacrificing a bra over a place in an actual like academy in a team?
I think actually the question,
Sorry, do you like, do you see, like, say you mentioned first generation, like immigrants, for example, and because soccer is like so expensive, do they kind of say to themselves, look, we can't afford a sports bra, but we'll get her into soccer anyways?
Yeah, I think, I'm not sure. We haven't had that direct conversation. Sometimes it's hard to have that conversation. So we look by what we see. We know that I was working with a club in Manhattan as an example, and it's in the city, so you're in Manhattan, and the boys program looked very much like Manhattan. You could speak half a dozen different languages. It looked like Manhattan. It was a mix of everything. And then the girls program really looked much more American suburb. And it wasn't that they were recruiting differently for the programs, but it was because those populations that gravitated to the boys program just naturally, because they came from communities, whether they came from a country that played or their parents did or their grandparents did, that was just sort of a way to integrate in, was to get the boys involved in soccer, which is wonderful. But you didn't see that same translation on the girls' side. So I think those are communities we're very conscious of, especially in urban communities. In some of the rural communities, the barriers are a little different. We're looking at a lot of stuff right now with some of the indigenous populations, because we know that there's not necessarily the same stores available on reservations, and there's also not the same financial resources. And as you said, in soccer in the U.S. is a pay-to-play model for most areas, and it's expensive. So if it's not your culture, if resources are tight, then the girls playing is not going to be your first priority. Which is unfortunate. So just having that conversation even has been interesting.
Talk to us a little bit about some of the other barriers that are faced. So obviously, you are trying to, remove this as a barrier for a lot of young girls and women, and it's something that can be taken for granted. But what other, barriers have you seen for young girls and women in sport?
I think. Wow, where do you even start with that conversation? I think you could talk on that one for hours alone. And it depends where you are. I think that the best way to sort of sum it up for me would be to say the sports bra is really a symptom of that, and it's just a way to start that conversation. There's much of sports. There's so many more, at least in the U.S., girls playing now, which is wonderful to see. But then you start looking at the coaching roles and the leadership roles, and you don't see the women there. So I think this not having sports bras ordered as kind of standard equipment is a symptom of not having leadership that's representative of the people who are participating. And that's the bigger conversation that we really want to kind of start getting the girls, whether they're involved in running a sports bra drive or receiving the bras, having that conversation and normalizing their experiences. So when you're hitting puberty, you need a sports bra. So having that is just oh, great. Okay, we're going to go buy a sports bra. It's no big deal. It's not an extra. It's not an other. So I think the sports bra and many other things are just a symptom of some of that lack of leadership roles being filled by women. The number of times that my friends and I have been the only women in the room, and oh wait, let me bring up the women's issue. We're going to talk about bras now, and that's got to change. That's got to become something where it's like, oh great, we're ordering socks, we're ordering shorts, we're ordering sports bras, we're ordering jerseys, and then it's not an issue, and then the girls are feeling much more included. So if that sort of answers your question in a little bit of a roundabout way.
No, like I was even kind of curious, like I always feel that like sport is kind of a microcosm of like society in general. So like in Ireland, as an example, like you wouldn't have great education on like the menstrual cycle, even like, you know, basic sex education, because, you know, the Catholics or the Catholic Church still runs a bunch of our schools. So like the education isn't there. So like when you have a sports team and it's like compromised of say 13-year-old girls and one of them gets their period, they immediately think I can't play sport anymore. So do you think like that's the same as well with the like with the bras and everything? It's just such a reflection of like society as a whole.
Absolutely. I think you hit on it. And all those issues that we tag as female issues, which would be the sports bra and having feminine products and med kits, those things are all sort of extras and othered as being, you know, special to girls. I'm like, they're not special. This is just a piece of it. So yeah, I think you hit on it. And the feminine products is a huge one, especially if you have, as you said, a girl getting her first period and she has a male coach and all of the leadership in the organization is male. Who is she going to turn to? Well, she can turn to her teammates, obviously, but it's not something that then becomes part of their normal conversation. And then, as I believe you've already done some podcasts on it, but the menstrual cycle, especially as they're getting older, there are implications for when you can train harder and different things. And instead of that being just sort of, you know, great, we learn this, we do this, and this is how we manage it, it's still considered that other piece and that unique or a weakness almost, which is unfortunate. And I think that's something that we see also in other countries too. Like the development of breasts. I think of a sports bra as purely for comfort. For me, that's all it is. I'm not well endowed. I'm not Dolly Parton, but it's just a comfort piece. But in talking to women in other areas, they've talked about the athletes being embarrassed if they didn't have a sports bra. And I couldn't quite get it when she first said it. And she's like, well, it's shameful. And if you're bouncing, it's seen as shameful and you're promiscuous, and that's shameful to you and your family. And that's a whole other cultural piece in it that just, if we addressed it as normal, just like period stigma and, development of breast stigma, it needs to just start to be part of that conversation. And that'll keep more girls involved.
Jeez.
Talk to us a little bit about what sport can give people, because you obviously have vast experience in coaching and a clear passion for sports. So what are the benefits in being involved?
Tons. I mean, there's just at a basic personal level, it's just a fitness and personal health. At a bigger picture level, we know that athletes that are involved, or people that are athletes or grow up playing sports, tend to be able to take on more leadership roles. Especially we see that with men, but we also see that with women. We see that with, the leadership in Fortune 500 companies from women is very small, but every single one of them who's involved in Fortune 500 leadership was a former athlete. So I think there's just a lot of lessons and potential that you can learn from it. It's obviously, physically beneficial, lots of lessons that you can learn for, whether it's, perseverance, how to work as a team, all those things. Obviously, not every athlete's going to get all of that, and some experiences aren't positive, but I think the potential is there, and having access to that, whether you want to play at an elite level or whether you want to play at a recreational level, is essential, I think, for a community. It's also that sense of community, and it brings people together in a way that I think, I don't know if you can say this in Ireland, and you can certainly cut this out outside of religion. I think sport is one of the unifiers potentially of communities. It can also divide, but it's one of the big unifiers. And I think it's a sort of universal conversation. We're talking about it in different countries, and we can talk about it, just about anywhere in the world. And there's some kind of sport. It may not look like our sport, but there's some kind of sport, and that's been part of it, which I think is a lot of fun.
Yeah, like it's obviously incredible. I was reading one of your interviews, I think you did with The Guardian, and you basically said that, sometimes that for like girls, there's like a need to justify like their involvement in sport, which I thought was incredibly interesting. Like, what would you kind of mean by that? Like, do you see kind of a difference in that, like a boy kicks a ball, good for John, but like Mary kicks a ball and Mary is going to learn leaping skills, she's going to be like a social butterfly. Is that something that exists?
Absolutely. I think we've grown up, at least, especially in the US, so I can speak to that because that's where I grew up. But boys just play. If a boy wants to play, he should be able to play. That's just the kind of the way we perceive it. Nike did a wonderful series of ads, I want to say in the 90s. And in the 90s, it was a beautiful ad. It said, if you let me play. And I think there were like 5 or 6 things they listed. If you let me play, my grades will be better. If you let me play, I will be healthy. healthier. If you let me play, I will be less likely to be in an abusive relationship. And it gave you all these wonderful things, which were true, and they had research to back it up. And in the 90s, that was something that was needed. We needed to hear that it wasn't something that was going to damage girls and women to play. But I think we need to move past that, and we don't need to justify it anymore. Girls and women should be able to play because they want to play. And yes, there are wonderful benefits to it for anybody who participates in sports. There's potential amazing benefits, but we need to stop justifying that. And we need to just say women have the right to play as much as guys have the right to play. And as you said, if Johnny's kicking a ball, well, Sally should be able to kick that same ball just for the same reason that it's kind of fun. And not because she's going to get anything more out of it than being able to kick the ball.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk to us a little bit about your background in sports philanthropy. It's something that we have kind of seen a lot in the US, but it's less so in Ireland. So talk to us a little bit about that, like educate the kind of country that doesn't really, know a lot about philanthropy and how it all works.
It's a new field to me, I'll be honest. I came through the coaching background, so it wasn't really on my radar until I started the Sports Bra Project, and then realizing that I think there's a lot of people who want to use sport for social change. There's a lot of sport-based youth development programs, sport for social good, and all of those things are relatively new fields. I think they certainly weren't around when I was it was nothing we studied when I was in school, but I think in the last 10, 15 years, they've sort of come to the forefront that athletes can use their financial resources, but they can also use their name recognition to further causes that are close to them. So you're starting to see athletes, and you've seen with female athletes for years do it, though they haven't always been given the credit for it, but that we've seen female athletes always advocating for girls and women. And then we're also now seeing corporations that want to give back, and corporations that, whether they want to give back altruistically or whether they want to give back because it looks good for their image, giving back in that sports world is something that sort of pays off for them a bit. So sports philanthropy is one of those fields that's growing, and it really is tied to a lot of community engagement. As I said, sport-based youth development programs, sport for social change and for social good. They're all things that are starting to become a lot larger. And then with businesses, between athletes and businesses getting involved in it, it's a growing field. I actually did a course, George Washington University has a sports philanthropy certificate program, which was fascinating to see areas that I'd never even thought about. Coming from the coaching background, you kind of knew it was out there, but you didn't really, it wasn't my focus. And now being able to realize that there's so many people and so many organizations who want to use sport for positive things and want to make sure it's accessible, and being able to tap into that sort of community has been amazing.
Yeah, it's like really cool. And like your team has recently announced a couple of new people on the board, and stuff like that. I know we mentioned Kelsey and our Invest in Women, Pay Women and Hire Women t-shirts. Kelsey, don't kill me if we're not wearing it. Sarah's wearing hers. But like for Irish people who kind of don't really understand, like how would a company and a sports philanthropy kind of group like the Sports Bra Project, how is it kind of like made up? Are you like a recognized like charity? Not to be like all into the nitty gritty of finances and stuff like that, but like, here you'd probably be like a recognized sports charity, whereas like philanthropy just sounds a bit nicer. Like the words foundation and philanthropy, like it doesn't sound as like, I don't know, demeaning, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think that's funny how language is so interesting around that, whether it's a charity or a nonprofit. The language we usually use is we're a nonprofit. I guess, yeah, charity does, as you say, has some different connotations with it. And I think it depends. I think they're probably different in Ireland a little bit than they are in the US. So we are a recognized nonprofit in the US. So that's a 501c3, which in certain classifications would probably be referred to as a charity. So what we are all volunteer driven right now, and we are funded by people and organizations that make donations to help cover the overhead, some of the shipping stuff. And then we're at the point right now where initially we were what was called fiscally sponsored. So another nonprofit, we kind of, as a test balloon, we kind of operated under their umbrella for a while. And then we realized the interest was there, and we had a wonderful law firm that took us on and pro bono and took us to our nonprofit status, which we got in February of 2020. So we were all excited to ramp everything up in February of 2020. And then of course the world shut down. But for us, what's been fascinating is I think when everything shut down, a lot of the women's sports community went online. And thank you to social media, which is how we connected and how actually a number of the people that are involved in the project have connected. Social media is that ungate-kept media and that ungate-kept way to connect without, it's just done amazing things for women's sports, I think, being able to reach out and figure out what other organizations are doing and connect with people who are interested in the same way. Because you may be operating in your own little silo as the only woman in a business, but now suddenly through social media, you're finding the other hundreds who are doing the exact same thing, and now you can have conversations which weren't possible 20 years ago. So the technology has done a lot for women's sports, which has been amazing to see.
Yeah, no, it's
so
definitely.
Sort of answer the charity question.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's absolutely like what technology and what, I mean, even the pandemic has forced us to do is like go onto this like virtual world and make connections all around the world and see. And there's so much going on around the world kind of in this space, and maybe not like loads in each individual country, but there's a lot of people around the world working on, you know, different things like this, and we can learn so much from each other in like, you know, how we can improve doing things or like help support each other, whether it's like doing this, like having a conversation and making people aware of it and you know, supporting everybody. But yeah, I think, look, I think it's so interesting what you do, and yeah, we can't wait to see you know, how further you could how you can impact like all around the world. It's amazing what you're doing, and yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you very much for it. We are growing, as we're US based, but we are looking at stuff in Australia. We've not done much in Ireland, or we've not done anything in Ireland. So if there are people who are interested in getting involved, we're happy to have that conversation and see how we can kind of start to do it.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
Universal piece of it. And I appreciate being able to, even if I rambled a bit, I apologize.
Not at all.
No, Sarah, no, we really do appreciate it. And yeah, no, thanks very much for giving up your time as well. We really do appreciate it.